Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Graying Jedi podcast and the Graying Jedi Council Chambers. I am UrzaMaster. Joining me as always, Lord Uther. And from the great force beyond, we have Jedi Master Psyllium Maas. Gentlemen, welcome back
Hello.
to that galaxy far, far away. And we are talking Andor Season 2, the final arc, Arc 3, the Arc du Triomphe of Andor, leading right into Rogue One, the last of the stories of Cassian and crew before the Death Star makes its big debut. Gentlemen, there's a lot to go over. A lot of things happen in these 3 episodes that are very consequential. I don't want to take anything away, but from the void of the Force beyond, Jedi Master Psyllium Maas, can you tell us what should we know about Arc 3 of this Andor Season 2?
Thank you, Jedi Masters, and thank you, loyal Graying Jedi podcast viewers. Once again, I join you from the void, but I would not miss the climactic arc of Andor, a Star Wars story, which, as Jedi Master UrzaMaster says, will lead directly into Rogue One, and that will be our next broadcast, where we will take not just a first viewing, but a reappreciation of Rogue One with all this new information now, all this new character development, all of these new and exciting story avenues that were explored. How does that affect that 2016 big screen Lucasfilm gamble that paid off handsomely at the box office and is a favorite of many fans, both young and old? Be sure you'll want to tune in for the Graying Jedi's reappreciation for Rogue One, a Star Wars story that's coming soon to the galaxy near you. But you can't get there until you start here. We have episodes 10, 11, and 12, Make It Stop, Who Else Knows, and Jedha Kyber Urso. This batch was directed by Alonso Ruiz Palacios. He is a Mexican filmmaker. He has 4 or 5 features under his belt, not many that were released stateside, although I'm sure they are viewable in various streaming and other formats. He also did a couple of episodes of Narcos Mexico, a very popular franchise that I believe Netflix has had the rights to for several years. So he was the director for the last 3. And the writer was Tom Bissell. And he is not related to Tony Gilroy or John Gilroy or Dan Gilroy. He is actually a former journalist and video game writer. I guess his most notable video game credit was Gears 5. I'm assuming that has something to do with Gears of War. But as a reporter, he worked for Harper's, Slate, and, irony abounds, The New Republic. And he also did work on the TV adaptation reboot a couple of years ago of The Mosquito Coast, which was an adaptation of the Paul Theroux novel, and Harrison Ford and Helen Mirren had done a 1986 version for the big screen. And Tom Bissell was involved in that show's development and writing. But he was hired to be on Andor Season 2 by Tony Gilroy, showrunner, because he was an unabashed and unapologetic Star Wars fan. And they actually needed one of those because these 3 episodes had to dovetail with existing canon as best it could. And so you have a lot of alignments and connections and things of that sort. And they turned to a Star Wars fan to help land the U-Wing. And he did so splendidly, and we'll get into that here in just a moment. Gentlemen, each episode kind of had its own rhythms and its own surprises, shocks, reveals. I can't pick a favorite Andor episode from Season 1 or Season 2. I know ones that absolutely stand out in the consciousness and ones that I'll have a hard time shaking. And we just had one of those in the last arc with the Gorman massacre at long last. We had one with Mon Mothma finally standing up in the Senate and being rescued by Cassian and hustled off via the Star Wars Rebels Ghost Crew in the animated series Star Wars Rebels off to Yavin 4 to assume leadership of the Rebel Alliance. But in this episode, this arc, gentlemen, Make It Stop, episode 10, the first of these three, really, 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 really underlined, was a high watermark for me. There was no Cassian Andor. In 23 episodes, he is on camera, makes appearances, does Cassian stuff. But in this one, he is absent. And instead, we focus on Luthen and Clea and Dedra and Supervisor Heat and Major Pendergrass, as well as some well-timed and much surprising flashbacks to Luthen as an Imperial, disillusioned Imperial trooper, back timeline-wise, a little bit before Solo, a Star Wars story, but within the same rough parameters of the timeline, when Han was in the mud and running into his future Wookiee co-pilot in the swamps and mud flats of Minban. That's kind of around where we meet up with Luthen at first, and we get the episode title, Make It Stop. Gentlemen, I mean, the Bourne Identity has nothing on Clea and what lengths she will go to rescue her father figure mentor. The line actually used in the episode, "Am I your daughter now?" and Luthen's, "When it's useful," says everything about their relationship and about Luthen Rael. His confrontation with Dedra, I want you gentlemen to sound off on all of this, but if the last two episodes are really about story construction and just putting all the pieces in place to align with the movie that we know what happens and who it happens to and how it goes down, this episode is divorced of that, and it's truly about this master spy finally running out of corners to turn around, and yet still managing to get the upper hand on his opponents thanks to the resourcefulness, bravery, and just viciousness, but in a good way, that Clea shows when she turns the switch from frightened nurse to steel-eyed assassin with the stormtroopers and officers in her path. I mean, she's almost Terminator-like in her relentlessness. And then we get the final moments that she gets with her father figure. And it's such a blow. It's such a blow. So let's start the discussion there, and then we can move on to Cassian and Yavin and those discussions and how it all lines up. But gentlemen, what did you think of episode 10 to begin with? Make It Stop.
Probably the best episode of season 2, in my opinion. I think ever since we met Luthen, I've wanted to know more about him. And I mean, to be honest, I almost still want more, because I want to know more of his and Clea's backstory. They could almost do like a whole prequel series on that. But the way this whole thing played out as like flashback / last moments was just beautiful. It was beautifully arranged, heartbreaking, but it really felt like the right conclusion. And the whole time Luthen has predicted, he's like, I'm not going to live to see the fruits of my labor. And so I don't think anybody should be shocked or surprised, but it definitely tugs at the heartstrings. And I'm really glad that Clea makes it through. Because I was quite worried that she wasn't going to for a minute there. And if ever there was more tension, I mean, there's so much good dramatic tension in this series, and especially in this season. But this episode in particular, this whole Solo Clea going through this, I mean, I thought it was a rescue attempt for a long time until she actually gets to the floor and sets off the bombs. And then I'm like, oh, she's going to make sure the right thing happens. The safe thing for the rebellion. She's living up to what Luthen would want her to do and not playing the, I need to save this person who's like a father figure to me. And this really makes it so much more emotionally heavy. But you realize that all of these characters that you've been moving through this series with have such deep conviction. Clea probably most of all. And I don't think even Andor quite raises himself to that level until Rogue One. And it just, I mean, you feel really good about the rebellion, but you just feel terrible for Clea. And at the end of this episode, you're not really confident yet that she's going to make it out, despite all the things she just did. I mean, you know the information's going to get out, but you don't know that she's going to make it. Is she just going to radio in, pass along the info, and stormtroopers find her, and she, decides to just take her own life or something? Like I don't know that I've ever been as on the seat of my couch watching this, like gasping at the next moment, like, oh my gosh, what's going to happen next? I mean, this show does grab you often, but this episode in particular just, it takes you on a ride I don't know that I was ever prepared to be taken on by a Star Wars movie or show.
I'll go from the Dedra Luthen scene, because what I loved about that is she goes in there, her cocky self, and she really gets it handed to her, because it backfires on her. It totally screws up when he decides to try and do himself in, and she didn't see it coming. And I love that, because I think she is someone who plans everything out very meticulously, sets things up to make them happen, and here it goes completely backwards. And it's kind of like we start seeing the downfall of her happening with him, right? With him doing what he did and then eventually dying, and it kind of really starts messing things up for the Empire. So I kind of like that these things are coming around and kind of biting her in the keister. It's just not working out. I also like the scene. I didn't know that was Naboo, when they did that one flashback.
Yes.
And they blew up the bombs there. I didn't know that until I saw it, somewhere else. I thought that was kind of cool. I wonder, would Luthen have done this for Clea? My guess is yes, just to save the rebellion, right? But I almost feel like doing what she did wasn't just for the rebellion, but it was for Luthen as well. Like, letting him go, because probably the last thing he would want to do is get captured and give up information, and this is her way of, again, doing that for him, even though it's still kind of connected to rebellion at the same time. So I appreciated that as well. I can't think of a better series. It's like Diego Luna said, though I would like to see another season, which I told you guys that. I just want to see Andor and K2 flying around the galaxy doing stuff. To me, it's the whole, and I brought this up before, it's the whole Michael Jordan thing. Like, you go out on top, and you're always remembered like that if Jordan would have retired after his second three-peat, right? Even though I'm happy he came back for a couple of years, I would have been okay if he didn't. And here we've got a series, and I know we'll talk about the third episode in probably a couple minutes here, that just, name me a bad episode, guys. Can you name me one? I don't think I can. I can't think of one off the top of my head. And we could go back to The Mandalorian, which, of course, you can find in our pending rebrand archives. And I could tell you, we know a couple episodes that just did not live up to it. Book of Boba Fett, same thing, right? So here we are with a series that every single time it's a dinger right out of the park. Every time. And this episode does not disappoint. And Psyllium Maas, thanks for bringing up the point, and I didn't recognize it until you said it. That's how great this series is, that Cassian wasn't even in this episode. I have no idea how I did it. It never occurred to me until you brought it up.
There you go.
So just another beautiful thing. Now the question is, would I have liked to have seen Clea somewhere in in the sequels, or I'm sorry, in the original 3. And there's a theory out there that she was on the Hoth base, calling out, I think, for the ion cannons to fire or something like that. Like
Oh
there's
yeah.
a fan theory out there. But and then again, I'm okay if we don't see her, right? Like, then people are trying to connect. Sorry, I'm going on a little bit of a jog here, but who cares? Then I'm jumping into episode 3. I'll hold off because it's an episode 3 thing.
No, but you mentioned Dedra. There's like two great conversations in this arc with her, and then one great reveal. And the first great conversation you bring up is with Luthen, and you talk about her being confident. I love that Luthen he's never on his back foot in that conversation. Like, every time she thinks she's like sprung a little zinger, like showing him the star path that he and Cassian left behind in season 1 when they were escaping Ferrex and all of that, he's completely unflappable. And when she says, like, you disgust me, and he said, well, he goes, the rebellion's left, it's flown away. He goes, there's a whole galaxy out there waiting to disgust you. Like, if he hadn't tried to take his own life, he could have just been bantering with her, all day. He was cool and unflappable, even when he knew he was surrounded. She had the jump on him, basically. He was going to go into custody, possibly an Imperial torture droid. So, a fantastic conversation. Contrast that with the opening conversation of the second episode with her and Orson Krennic. And by the way, Krennic, it's fascinating in this arc, which is when he's brought in. We see him at the party at Davos Scoldens. We see him giving the initial Gorman briefing. Make sure you don't put this in your calendars. He's very smarmy. He's very imperial, and in this one even he's a bit grabby. Like, he presses his finger into the back of her head in his gloved hand to make a point, and when he's leaving, he like grabs her by the chin and like. For a second, it's almost like when Cyril choked her. It's like it's a very physical crossing of space for Krennic. But I bring that up because if you rewatch Rogue One, and we will probably discuss this on our reappreciation, he spends a good portion of Rogue One being dressed down by like Tarkin saying, I'm taking over the Death Star, and Vader saying, quit screwing up, or, the Emperor will. Like, he spends a little bit of that movie on his back foot and sort of uncertain. So here we get to see Krennic, alpha male, like, I'm Imperial, and he's shouting, He's accusing Dedra of being a rebel spy. And I was mentioning this with some other Star Wars fans that live in my house. Isn't it funny how Dedra, as we've seen her, as we've been exposed to her character, she's like the perfect Imperial, right? She was raised in an Imperial Kinderblock. She really, whatever her relationship with Cyril, physicality aside, she doesn't know how to have an actual empathetic relationship one-on-one with other people. She kind of annoyed her coworkers because she was always, trying to get ahead and so forth, interrupting in class. But she was the perfect Imperial soldier, and yet, thanks to this confluence of events, Orson Krennic halfway believes that she was working with the rebellion or with Luthen somehow. Like, the irony, right? And so they arrest her. And, she's like, well, we'll get this sorted. And she ends up basically in whatever the new equivalent of Narkina is. If it's not Narkina 3 or Narkina 5, it's Narkina 11. But there she is in the same cell that Cassian was anonymously in season 1. I mean, not the same cell, but you get it. She doesn't have any shoes. She's making widgets, we presume, or some other, like, that was her fate. She went from an ISB supervisor to basically running an intelligence operation on a mid-rim world to now lost in the Imperial cogs. Now, eventually, the rebellion will triumph. The New Republic will step in. I don't know what they're going to do with Imperial prisoners. I mean, does she get parole? I mean, these are all things you can debate endlessly. But, like, she sees the same truth Cyril does. But unlike Cyril, when he stands amidst the Gorman massacre and you can feel his conscience eating away at him as he realizes his culpability, if you look at her in that prison cell, I don't see repentance. I don't see remorse. I see disbelief. I see like, how can this be happening to me? Or there must be some mistake. I shouldn't be here. Someone will, the emperor or someone will step in and remove, like, there's this visceral look of kind of disbelief on her face. So she never, as far as we know her, she never really truly accepts. And Cyril, on the other hand, has this enlightenment right before he decides to throttle Cassian, like, oh my God, the Empire's, the things I believed in, they were all fake. It was all false. They never really were this. They instead were this monster, fascist force. So yeah, that was my impression with Dedra. Like, really powerful stuff. And Denise Guff, again, lots of credit to her. She made villainry watchable. Like, you can be sympathetic to her even in some motions, but in the end, she kind of had it coming.
I so want to just jump. You went right to the third episode because there's so much I want to say about that. But well, I just think so. I guess this is a little bit into the third episode, but whatever. So I think there's a great contrast here, right? And here's what I mean by that. It's like in the Empire, when you get to the top, you're going to tumble down no matter what. Like we're seeing that with all of these high-level Imperial leaders. In the rebellion, we don't see that. And here's why I think this is an important point. Just because you're a leader and you make a mistake doesn't mean you should be removed from that position, because you got to that leadership position for a reason. And removing you, even though you might have made a mistake, actually hurts your organization in the long run, because you're taking experienced leaders out of that, and there's a lot of fear that if I get to the tippity top, even though I want to get there, I'm going to be in a prison somewhere, right? And so to me, this kind of shows the downfall of the Empire. I think we've talked a lot, and I think it's important about the Sith Jedi thing is just a little piece of this, or a piece of it, right? Here's the other piece that goes on. And if you really want to look at the downfall of the Empire, you might say it's situations like this where you're bumping off your top people who have had an impact on the organization in a sense, but you're bumping them off and you're making the whole thing weaker and you're making people fearful. And that's maybe why they're giving rebellion plans away, because they're fearing for their family or things like that. And all of a sudden, something to UrzaMaster's point that could actually be almost viewed upon as a good thing overall for some people, now makes you fearful beyond the Darth Vader showing up at your door. And I think that all plays into this as well. That's part of the, like, if you really want to start digging very, very deep into this, that's part of it, right? And I love your point, Psyllium Maas. Her being in that prison cell, she wasn't mad that she was mad that she screwed up somewhere along the way. There's no redemption for her. She would never look at it the way Cyril does. Cyril almost looked at the Empire, and we've talked about this, was a good thing for people in general, possibly. For her, it was about a power grab the entire way. This wasn't about doing the right thing for the Empire in a sense. It was her just trying to power her way through this entire thing. And I think those contrasts are important, and again, play to the whole idea of why the Empire fell.
And Cyril's Anakin, Dedra's Darth Vader. I mean, that's what it is. It's the two sides of the Sith. Dedra has all of whatever innocence she had completely torn from her when Cyril dies on Gorman. And she leans very heavily into the dark side that brought her up. And I mean, you could look at this from the perspective of the Acolyte, too, of the sisters. The surviving Sith sister is Dedra. The other sister, who we thought was evil the whole time, Cyril, that's the sister that ends up being the one that's actually good in the end. So it's this interesting method that the Empire deploys, which I think it's so funny that at no point does anybody in the Empire realize that they are utterly expendable. Nobody cares about any of them. Like at the end of each arc, each movie, the only people who really matter to the Empire are Palpatine and Vader. That's it. Everybody else is totally expendable. Tarkin, they don't really care. It's not like there was a funeral procession for Tarkin after the Death Star blew up. Krennic dies on Scarif. They nuked the place with the Death Star. All kinds of troops down there, probably other officers. They're all expendable, replaceable. They're nobodies. In the eyes of the Emperor, he really doesn't care. And that's one way to exert utter control, is you just keep bumping people off and let everybody know you're never that important. Even if you rise the ranks, even if you're a Grand Moff, even if you're, a local governor, at the end of the day, the only one who matters in this whole thing is Palpatine. And I guess to a lesser extent Vader, which Palpatine really doesn't care about Vader either. As we find out in episode 6. And the only question that leaves in my mind after seeing all of this play out in Andor, because I've always suspected this about the Empire, is that, everybody's a replaceable piece of Palpatine's greater design, because he's the only one that lives on, right? He's the only one who's all of the Sith. He keeps replicating himself because he's the only person in existence he actually cares about. What about Grand Admiral Thrawn?
Ooh.
That's the question on my mind. Is he's quite revered by the Empire, but he's almost viewed as a little too dangerous by Palpatine. So, kind of makes me wonder, like, where does he fit in this equation?
Well, do you think so? First of all, awesome points as always. So here's I'm just going to give you a little gut feeling on this one real quick. It's like they let Thrawn do his own thing, almost go rogue a little bit, as long as he stayed away, almost, right?
Yeah.
I mean, think about it. I think he was mostly on the outer rim, right? Not near where the Emperor's at or Vader's really at. And because maybe he's a little roguish, they don't mind them. They don't mind Thrawn expanding that Imperial power in a sense out that way, as long as he just stays there. Right?
I mean, you can draw, and we've had 50 plus years to draw upon all this, at least coming up on our 50th anniversary of the original New Hope. But the Empire has always been kind of human forward. You'll notice that most of the staffing is done by humans in all its iterations. And while Thrawn is a tactical genius, and they recognize this as such, there is something alien about him, if you will. I wonder what it could be. But that has always been suggested that was one of the reasons Palpatine just, he didn't trust other species. He didn't trust. And again, they don't foreground it. It's not an obvious point, but you can certainly look for it there. Gentlemen, the Cassian story was always going to end with him getting on the ship to go to the Ring of Kafrene, and in which that's where we will pick up our reappreciation of Rogue One. So we kind of knew he, in a sense, had sort of the least amount of lifting to do in these last three because, his path was basically set. What was fascinating was the dynamic that they had to lay out as to why Clea's story and Cassian, trying to go to bat for her, why the rebellion, the Alliance was so hesitant to accept it. And again, I need to rewatch the exact dialogue for Rogue One, but I feel like they did a good job here in the show of saying, yeah, okay, so, we have this person telling us about a super weapon that, et cetera, but she's distraught. The person, her agent she was working with was just killed by her own hand. We never really trusted Luthen anyway. I mean, there's this very and she didn't trust Yavin, so you have that. You also have that with Saw, basically telling Mon Mothma, Bail Organa, and General Radis to go pound sand, stay away, we're doing our own thing out here, are you on Jeddah, Saw, and how he gets outraged at spies and leaks and so forth, and he wants nothing to do with them. So even though it's a, quote, rebel alliance, and even though we have a common enemy to unite against, there's a lot of factions and cliques and things of that sort that they have to overcome, and I'll let you guys sound off on that in a moment. I just wanted to make sure we don't overlook a couple of really really just great small moments. And my favorite of that was Major Pendergrass, whom once he realized that they were coming to take him to his own cell, he got the respect from his peer to, basically commit seppuku, or commit suicide. And I love the moment, done with no dialogue, where we hear the blaster off camera. You kind of expected that. And the stormtroopers start to react, and the Imperial holds up his hand, like, give it a minute. And then the stormtroopers sort of relent, and then it's just a fantastic little character moment. And we've seen that actor, I don't have his name off the top of my head, but we've seen him before in the conference room, and he was at Scavo's party, and he was there trying to stop Mon Mothma's broadcast from the Senate. Like, he's one of those guys that he's another faceless Imperial bureaucrat, but just that little raising of the hand very slightly, loved that moment, absolutely key. And I loved, even though, again, we kind of expected it, I just love bringing K2 back for these last couple of episodes. The Imperial asking him on the causeway, "Are you lost?" "No." And then flings him off the bridge like "I have cleared a path, Cassian." And my wife pointed this out. It's fascinating how, again, they've reprogrammed him. He's loyal to Cassian. He's loyal to the cause, to the point where he's citing rules and regulations like 3PO might. But he still retains some of his Imperial memories, right? He talks about, "I was in a parade. The Emperor was there." And it's funny, it's fascinating to me, like, that I guess the memory wipe doesn't just completely root all that out, and that as a droid, because he's bound by his programming, there's no sense of conflicted loyalties, right? He never says, "Boy, maybe I should go back and join the Empire." It doesn't seem like that's ever in the cards, or the tiles that they're betting on when we first see them. And that's interesting to me, that he's able to remember that he was Imperial and on the other team, but that doesn't matter to him now, because the way he's been reprogrammed or so forth, Cassian's his man, and he'll do whatever he's ordered to do by him, or General Draven. Also nice to see him return from Rogue One. Nobody barks better than Draven. That is completely unacceptable. Very almost Jean-Luc Picardish at times in terms of raising his vocal register. But when it comes down to it, when it comes times to send Cassian to unground him, if you will, he's the one who shows up. So he and Bail Organa, and that reminds me of another great K2 line muttered under his robotic breath. The man you don't like is here. Or so he refers to Bail Organa like the man that you don't like is waiting. And so that was funny, that the tension there. But gentlemen, episodes 2 and 3, it's all Cassian, it's all rebellion. And then we have that final montage of all our characters. And I know I want one of, or both of you, to discuss the last character we see in the show before we fade to black. So what did you think of Who Else Knows and Jedha, Kyber, Urso?
Boy, I liked the last 2 episodes, but I gotta be honest, I wish it would have just been one. Like, I wish it would have been, like, not a 3-episode arc, because the second episode just didn't feel like a full episode, to be honest. It felt like the last 2 were very much one stream of consciousness episode that I would have liked to just not had to hit play a second time, if that makes sense. Like, it didn't add any drama for me because it was broken up. I mean, I suppose if you're the type of person that watches one episode of your favorite show every night, and you just played the second episode, and you're like, nope, I'm going to bed. I'm like, come on, how do you not want to see the next episode immediately? And it was a little predictable. I don't know, maybe it's from seeing Rogue One first. I knew that K2 was going to come in there and kind of clear the path. And there's a lot of convenient endings, right? I think that's, because we know how Rogue One is going to arrive. So, like, you know that Cassian is not going to get captured here. You don't necessarily know if anybody else is going to make it, but you know Cassian and K2 are getting out of there. And they're going to have the information. So, I don't want to say it felt contrived, but breaking the two up, it was like, I don't think that was necessary. What I would have liked to see, instead of the episode 2-3 we got, is have episode 2 and 3 be episode 2. So it drops off right at where Rogue One would start. But in the interim, in episode 3, you get the story of Bix and what she's doing during episodes 2, 3, and Rogue One. And where does she end up at A New Hope? Is she aware of what happens in Rogue One? Because now I want to know her story, and more importantly, I assume their baby's story.
Yes.
And that's like, I think I messaged you guys, like, it was, Rogue One was already a tearjerker ending. Like, you know, my wife was telling me, I was watching it yesterday, and she's like, gosh, I haven't seen this since the theater. And she came in a few minutes from the end, and she's sitting there watching with me. She's like, oh yeah, I remember. I didn't like this one because everybody dies at the end. And I'm like, well, I mean, yeah, sort of. I'm like, I'll say, if you think that's sad, watch all of Andor first and then watch Rogue One, because you know, that scene with Bix, I mean, it just tears your heart up. I'm glad that she's back with the droid.
B2.
On the farming planet with B2. But yet another, you know, single parent due to the Empire or due to the rebellion, or both. Yet another child that's going to grow up not knowing some or potentially all of their family, depending on what Bix does next, right? Finding out what happens to Andor. What does she do? What does the Empire do after the Death Star? Because Rogue One feeds right into A New Hope, which I kind of forgot about until I finished watching. I'm like, holy crap, like, this happens immediately after, like, that day, or within a couple of days. So what is Bix doing? And, you know, the unanswered question of Rogue One and Andor, because I think the entire time it's implying that, and y'all can correct me if I'm off base here, but it implies that Cassian has some connection to the Force. And
I don't disagree. Yeah, I don't disagree.
Yeah, you get the little Force guru guys from Jeddah who come along and end up going to Scarif with him. So you know there's other Force wielding people out there who are not Jedi, who are post Jedi Force sensitives. Andor seems to keep running into these folks. So it kind of begs the question, after Andor's death in Rogue One, is his supposedly child with Bix a Force user that ends up at Luke's Jedi Temple?
Wow.
And are we going to see that child palling around with Grogu? And or maybe Ahsoka?
Wow.
All I know is it's not Poe Dameron, so I don't want to hear that theory anymore. I'm so sick of that. Like, no.
Or what's his nuts? The other guy, Moon Knight. Is it Moon Knight?
Oh yeah. I have not. Yeah.
I don't remember his name. He's a fine actor. I just don't remember his name.
Oh yeah, that dude.
I know him as Moon Knight.
Exactly. Name me a better 5 or 10 minute ending besides maybe the Luke Skywalker episode of Mandalorian that was better than this, because I don't know of one. Every single here's what I mean by that. Well, let me add to this. There have been good endings to a series, but you could still pick a little bit at something that maybe happened in that ending, that closure. I can't pick away at anything with this. And now that you bring up the whole Force thing, he's walking and he looks at the Force healer. Right? And she's like automatically drawn to him too. Now some people have theorized like she foresees his death or something, but now that I see in this light, it could just be two Force users, or Force sensitives like recognizing each other almost, right? And Bix on that planet is just that was fantastic. And what really to me locked in this ending is Dedra being in that cell, because it takes you back to maybe the second best episode in this entire series, where they're in that cell block. I mean, just an amazing arc there as well. And to me, that was just like the cherry on the top. It was that good. I can't, and I told you guys, I think I messaged you saying I'm getting chills watching this ending. It was absolutely perfect. I can't think of another way to put it.
Yeah, I think I see both certain points of view here. With UrzaMaster, there is this feeling that yes, we know so much that is to come, that it does remove a little bit of that suspense. Like he's trapped in this apartment, and how they're going to have to shoot their way out, and then here comes K2. I love that Supervisor Hiet, who was giving Dedra guff the whole time, and now he was going to run down all the clues and do it. He basically gets turned into a human meat shield at the end there, and will die anonymously in a rundown apartment in Coruscant. Like they'll just all right, zip him up and get him out of here. So you're talking about Expendables. Like there's another one that was beautiful. But I can see where the sense of, all through the third episode, as he was arguing with the council and with being grounded, I'm like, well, yeah, but now something's got to come forward that they say, all right, fine, get on a ship and go see if this is true. And I mean, so there was sort of an air of familiarity in terms of that. But to Lord Uther's point, it was just emotionally satisfying to see, we covered everybody. We covered Val and Mothma. We covered Mothma's husband. He's now hooking up with Davos Skolden's, they've just spent the night out, partying. And it's like, so how did that happen? Because Davos Skolden didn't seem like the kind of guy that would let his wife just run around behind his back. So, I mean, and that perfectly is on brand with Mon's husband, obviously. But that was just a great moment. Like the brilliance of Tony Gilroy's sort of the way he has been writing his scripts for many, many years. Like that's a moment that we didn't know we needed until we saw it, and we're like, oh my God, that's perfect. And it was bringing back the manifesto. It's right before Pendergrass takes his own life. We hear that boy from Aldani, and we hear his words. And I think that's ultimately what Pendergrass crumbles a little bit inside. He realizes this isn't just some isolated cell we can step on with our boots and squash. Like, rebellion is everywhere. Luthen was absolutely right, even though he wasn't there to hear him say it. It's flown away. It's infected hundreds of worlds and thousands and millions of people, and they don't like us. And they're going to keep fighting us, even though we have bigger sticks and better weapons. That's just all that we cannot turn the tide. And so I thought that was just a fantastic moment. Gentlemen, there's a lot on the internet about this should be the future of Star Wars and all this. And you've heard me argue it again. Whether it's Skeleton Crew taking us back to our Spielberg Amblin years, whether it's, Ahsoka and Dave Filoni and The Mandalorian, digging deep into the mythology and so forth. Or whether it's a show like this, which said, you know what, we're going to show you rebellion and radicalization and things that were going on, outside where the camera was pointed during the movies and so forth. Like, I still believe the future of the franchise is very bright. But I think it can be bright just as strong with the mythology, with what Dave Filoni has got planned for this, Mandoverse movie coming up, and with another season of Ahsoka. We were teasing it with Baylan Skoll and what, secrets he was prepared to unleash. And, we're going to get more of that storyline. We're going to get more of Thrawn and his machinations. There's the expectation, although not confirmed, is that, if you're aware of the Timothy Zahn Heir to the Empire arc, that's some of those details will start to filter in, to this future thing of Star Wars storytelling. And so don't just root for, we don't need just the political and the R-rated and all of that. Star Wars can be many things to many fans, for multi-generations. But make sure you don't lose sight that this is for children, it's for grown-ups, it's for grandparents, and so I think we should just be thankful that we had such, 24 episodes of just a really fantastic show that just happened to be set in a galaxy far, far away.
For all you youngins out there, before we give our lightsaber crystal thing rating, if you were to tell me when I saw the original series in the theaters that I was going to get this one day, I would have told you you were lying and you were crazy and it was never going to happen, and then I was going to get better special effects that I'm watching on TV that I could have seen in the theater. I would have told you were lying, and that this universe was going to grow beyond just what we've seen, what we saw back then. I would have told you were lying. You are living in the golden age of Star Wars TV and for our other podcast, probably Star Trek as well. Like you are just lucky, well, except for that Section 31 movie. I'm sorry, that's another podcast. Which all you have to do is just click over to that podcast. I only got 10 seconds in that movie and shut it off. But anyway, you're very, very lucky with what you have. And I hope you appreciate all the different kinds of Star Wars that we're getting. UrzaMaster, you want anything to that before you give your lightsaber crystal?
I'll just kick it off with Kyber crystals because I couldn't agree more. We are in the golden era of streaming programming when it comes to all sci-fi things. I can't wait for them to bring back sliders. And Supernatural Season 16. If you need a writer, I'm right here. I've got it all up here. 10 more seasons, easy. I'm going to go with straight up brilliant emerald green Kyber crystal for Andor Season 2, Arc 3, the finale. Just outstanding writing, unbelievable character development. Some of it, honestly, I don't feel it was all unpredictable, but I don't care. Like, it never felt so contrived that I, saw exactly what was coming. I had a feeling Luthen was going to be dead before the end of the show. I had a feeling that certain characters were going to survive that maybe you wouldn't have expected, like Clea or Bix or Mon Mothma's husband. Honestly, I thought they'd kill him off at some point. I really did, and they may yet. I mean, like you said, there's still so many more stories we could tell without even getting to any of the other Empire stuff. You could tell non-Empire era stories. That's the thing. There is a whole bunch of bounty hunter stories that you could tell that have nothing to do with Jedi, nothing to do with the Empire, that could just sort of kind of touch those things. The one thing I would say, before I turn it to y'all for your Kyber crystals, is what makes this show such a brilliant green is that it does bring in a little bit of the Force. It brings in just a little bit of those things that we don't get with the Force Healer and with Andor possibly being Force sensitive. And I think that's so lowly, and just barely implied that it like my bat signal goes off. I'm like, oh. So that's what I want to see more of. And I do think there's a whole litany of Force sensitivities out there that they could start touching on and telling those stories. Not to mention, Saw Gerrera adventures would be huge. Like a whole sabotage subterfuge, the extremists of the rebellion, and there's more rebel factions too. There's so much more, which is exciting. This doesn't have to end here. And it is the golden era. And it's only going to continue to grow in scope. And I really don't think, if you do it like this, you're never going to take away from the beauty that is the original trilogy or even the canon we have to date.
Before I give my Kyber crystal, Mon eating with the everyday trooper, just such a cool thing that she's sitting amongst the troops like a real leader should. I thought that that was just absolutely fantastic. And to your point, and we talked about this a little bit before, the threat of the Emperor without the Emperor ever showing up was just genius. They never pulled him in, though I'm telling you, I thought at some point we were going to see him, and I wasn't sure if I wanted to see him, and we didn't see him, and I'm happy we didn't see him because they played him perfectly. I'm going Kevin McHale Green because every move made in this show is almost like Kevin McHale. It's a bucket every time. So that's how good this series was.
And you can't see my green, but with apologies to Kermit the Frog and Jim Henson, it is easy being green with Andor seasons 1 and 2. And Star Wars fans, I know you've been watching. Non-Star Wars fans, get in on it now. See what all the fuss is about. This one, I hope, is remembered come award season. There's lots of potential stars and people behind the camera to pick out. It's gone too soon, but we're so glad we had it.
And until we get back to that galaxy far, far away, thank you, Gilroy's, for Cassian Andor and these stories. We can't wait to see what's next. Can't wait to see that blue dude again and what's going to happen next in that galaxy far, far away. But don't worry. The Graying Jedi Council will be here for you. And always, the Force will be with you.